Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to the audience and to the speakers. My name is Shirihan Al-Sawah, Assistant to Dean of the School of Global Affairs and Public Policy at the American University in Cairo. I would like to welcome you all to the first online webinar for the alumni of the School of Global Affairs and Public Policy, attended by AUC alumni as well. We are thrilled to be sharing with you this special event today. First, we wanted to create a platform to connect us with our outstanding alumni all over the world. The purpose of this event is to discuss the challenges and opportunities for global and public affairs in a changing environment. This is actually very crucial to providing a new framework to deal with altering current events that are rapidly changing our world today. We really look forward to hearing your insights, and you can send me your questions on the chat. And we're glad to host today Rawan Lashin and Elena Hersky, the alumni of the School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. They will share with us their own experience and their insights on the topic of today. I will leave the floor now to the founding dean of the School of Global Affairs and Public Policy and the former Foreign Affairs Minister of Egypt, Dean Nabil Fahm.
Thank you, Shirihan, and let me add my words of welcome to the audience, the participants, and of course, Elena and Rawan in particular, and thank them for joining us for this event. As dean, and I've been dean since the beginning, except for 1 year when I went off to back to government, frankly, what we've tried to do is help graduate students who, on the one hand, were committed to working in the common good, not only their own self-interest, although there's nothing wrong with doing that as well, but also alumni who could deal with changes. And we did that because as a School of Global Affairs, our genes are all over the world. It's not only where we live. And we then want to ensure that our students and our graduates have the skill sets to deal with diversity. Diversity, whether it is within the community, diversity within the global village, or diversity in terms of changing events. Diversity is always a challenge, but if you work on it constructively and with confidence, it's also a tremendous opportunity at the same time. Just by way of context, if I may, my own career, I studied physics at AUC, physics math major. Then I went on to do a master's degree in management. Had no intention whatsoever of joining government. Then did that for 30 years and more. Had no intention of joining academia. And then when the opportunity came to create the school, I frankly was so attracted to it that I took it on enthusiastically. Even though by then I had matured in age a little bit, it was both a process where I felt I could give, but a process where I was also learning continuously. And if I may say, what allowed me to do that was because in my professional career previously, as a diplomat, we were always learning because we were always in a different environment every few years. There were always different events. But one thing which did not change, and that's frankly what we were also so proud of and we're so focused on at GAPP. You worked for the common good. You had a responsibility to your society. You had a responsibility not only to yourself, but to stakeholders in your community and around the world, if I may say. The rules of the game changed as we saw it during, at least in my career as a diplomat, but they also changed, frankly, since I came to AUC at the beginning of GAPP. And let me just amuse you. At the very beginning, I was asked to make an inauguration speech. And I basically said, all due respect to academicians, and I'm going to learn from them in the next few years, I'm not a big numbers guy, although I studied physics and math. I respect numbers, but I don't over-respect them out of context. And I said, I'm not going to be focused on ratings initially, but I promise you we will make a difference, irrespective of the ratings. Frankly, that was an easy argument to say, because while I was committed to make a difference, because I saw the great faculty we had, and I saw the very interesting students, I knew that as we made a difference, our rating would also get better in the academic realm, and it has. A few years later, remember, GAPP started in 2009. A few years later, I had to say, I promised you we would make a difference. I did not promise you 2 revolutions in 3 years. So we will deal with the consequence of that. And dealing with the consequence of that is through the graduates. It's through the students and the graduates. We need, as I said, to instill in you the commitment to the common good. We need to give you the skill sets, particularly critical thinking. Each one of you will have an interest in a different area, but we need to enable you to think critically, and I mean that in a constructive sense, to look at both sides of the angle, to put yourselves in the shoes of others in arguments, even if, by the way, you know they're wrong. Because when you are able to put your shoes in place of others, even when you know they're wrong, you know how to counter them with arguments that put them in a less important position. I may say that in the 10 plus years I've been at the school now, every year I'm prouder of the graduates than the year before. I've seen them mature, I've seen the quality increase so much, and I've seen, frankly, you go on to great universities to do graduate studies, or to go on to professions where you're making a mark in your society. For that reason, we wanted to re-engage with the alumni. We wanted the alumni to learn from you what we did right and what we did wrong, or what we could do better for generations after you. We wanted to join with alumni to make sure that you worked with us as we looked towards the future, because this is in global affairs, in global and public affairs, it's always about society and about how you engage in that. And frankly, there are no cement barriers between countries any longer. You have legal borders, but you need to be able to work with the hard assets that you have, but work even more intelligently with the soft assets and the mindset that exist. And that part of the package is international. Hopefully, this is going to be the beginning of a set of events that we will hold with alumni. If the scientists have their way, we'll be able to do these in the future face-to-face rather than online. But if we have to work with you online for a while, we'll do that as well. We invited today Elena and Rawan to talk to us about what they think the challenges and opportunities are for the future. But let me add and give you some room a little bit. When you do that, don't feel shy. We're here about critical thinking. We have debates all the time. Criticism is not going to annoy us. It's actually going to help us learn as we move forward. So besides the dean being particularly thick-skinned, so I mean, I don't get annoyed very easily either. But anyway, seriously speaking, I'm here to listen. My colleagues in the GAPP community who are still working at the school are here to listen, and I'm sure the participants will kick in with some ideas as well. So I'll give the floor back to Sherihan to manage the program. I may come in after you two speak as things move on. But again, before you start, I can't tell you how proud I am of you and how happy I am that you're engaging with us on this program. The floor is all yours. Sherihan.
Thank you, Dean Fahmy. I will now introduce Elena. Elena took her master's degree from the Center of Migration and Refugee Studies with honors in 2018. She's now working at the center as a project leader. Elena, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dean Fahmy and Sherry Han, for this wonderful invitation and for organizing this event. So as Sherry Han said, my name is Elena, and besides getting my master's degree in 2018 from the Center for Migration and Refugee Studies, I also studied abroad at AUC right after the revolution. So I studied abroad in 2011 and 2012. So that was a very exciting time to be in Cairo and to be in Egypt in general. And it was actually that study abroad year where I found out originally about the Center for Migration and Refugee Studies. And during this year was really the start of the Syrian crisis and what would become known as the Syrian Civil War. And seeing all of these people having to forcibly flee their homes and go to neighboring countries, this is when the interest sparked in me to work with these refugee and migrant communities, and what a perfect opportunity that AUC and GAPP offers this amazing master's degree program. So if we're going to talk about global challenges and opportunities in the field of migration, I mean, migration is a historical event that's been happening pretty much since the dawn of time, since our first human ancestors and our original ancestors came out of Africa, from the continent of Africa, and going to other places for food, for a warmer climate. So migration has always been happening. But really for us, in the current time, since 2015, we've seen, in Europe especially, the start of the so-called migration crisis. So a bunch of refugees and migrants and asylum seekers making their way from the Middle East, from the African continent, even from Asia onwards, to the European continent. It sparked kind of a rallying cry from both sides, from politicians, from academics, from the media, about what was happening. And of course, we can read the media, we can listen to academics, we can listen to politicians, but as Dean Fahmy said, we really need to critically think about what's happening. So as I had worked in the field of migration for 3 years in Jordan before joining CMRS, I wanted that academic background and to have that knowledge to say, well, no, wait, this is what's actually happening. These are the laws that can guard and protect refugees and migrants. And I chose CMRS originally because it was in the region. And I had worked in the region, I had studied in the region, I speak Arabic, and so it was just the perfect program for me. And since its inception in 2000, I believe CMRS as one of the first research institutions in the Global South, which focuses on migration. So it's one of the most unique places to study the topic and to critically examine how international migration is portrayed, especially by the media and by political figures. And which better city to have CMRS in than Cairo, this crossroads of Africa, of Asia, of the Middle East, and Europe, making it honestly the perfect classroom opportunity in and of itself to study migration. And migration obviously has a storied history within Egypt. So to study it historically, but also currently. So for me, it was just the perfect opportunity. And the classes offered by CMRS, for example, international refugee law, gave me a background in what protections are allotted to refugees and asylum seekers. So when we hear in the media, for example, people saying, well, they entered illegally, they can't stay here. Well, this isn't correct, because under international refugee law, it doesn't matter how an individual enters the country, regularly or irregularly, as long as they apply for asylum, they have that right to apply and to get refugee status. So for one instance, that was one course that I found extremely beneficial. Also, Dr. Ibrahim Awad, the director of CMRS, taught refugee and migration movements in the Middle East and North Africa. I mean, this is obviously a very special class because it is focused on the region. And many of the students, my peers, and now my colleagues, are interested in the region. And there's so much happening here, and so much that's misunderstood, I think, by other countries and regions in the world, particularly within the global north, that having not only a historical background of movements within the region, but also discussing contemporary issues, I found extremely beneficial. But from a practical standpoint, I also took a class on psychosocial issues and forced migration. So if I ever wanted to go back into the field, then I now have a background of, okay, what can a refugee, an asylum seeker, a migrant be experiencing on their journey, after their journey, even before their journey? This isn't particularly special for me or important to me as a researcher, that when I do one-on-one interviews, that when I do ethnographic field work, that I'm cognizant and I'm aware of what these individuals have gone through and how I should frame questions, frame interviews and discussions to make sure that they are at their most comfortable and that they don't feel vulnerable or exploited. So I found also this class very useful. In addition, I also had the opportunity to intern at the International Organization for Migration. So I got really a global standpoint at this UN organization of how these big organizations are operating. Sometimes they may feel so big and so broad that it's overwhelming, but having this opportunity to then go in and see not only what is IOM Egypt doing, but the regional office is also in Cairo. So to see how they operate with a regional office, but also within the region, a region that is obviously so important to their current global affairs and to migration. One thing that I find very important about CMRS, and I always espouse this when I talk to individuals who ask about CMRS or the research that we do, is a majority of the research that is now coming out about migration comes from the global north and global north institutions. So they are really writing the narrative of what migration is, what's happening, who's going where, why are they leaving, why are they entering. But having this institution within the global south, where the majority of migration actually takes place, gives CMRS and gives its researchers a rare opportunity to look at the story from within the global south. And we're able to do research on people migrating, for example, from Egypt to Jordan. So Egyptian workers who go to Jordan. Which is not obviously talked about often because it's not from North Africa across the Mediterranean to the European Union. But this research, this path of migration is very important for Egypt and for its economy, as many Egyptian migrant workers actually go to Jordan. We are also doing a Refugee Entitlements project, where we are looking at the legal entitlements owed to refugees, asylum seekers, and failed asylum seekers within Egypt. And it's one of the first projects of its kind, not only within the continent, but worldwide, where we look at, under international, national, regional, and bilateral law, which laws and protections are delegated towards these individuals. So I believe that this different perspectives allows not only the researchers, but when I was a student and my colleagues and peers, to question narratives, as I had said, policies, for example, the new EU Migration Pact that just recently came out, which has a lot to do with the African continent, as the EU wants to form partnerships and alliances and send development aid money towards especially North African neighbors, and as they externalize their borders. We can critically look at this from a perspective within the global north to say, well, wait, why is this happening? What are the outcomes? What are the potential outcomes of this? What has already happened within the past? And maybe how can we go towards the future in a more holistic approach? So not to take up too much time, but just to once again reiterate that the professors and staff at CMRS and within GAPP gave me, and I believe my colleagues, a critical perspective, again, on the narratives espoused by those academics and research institutions that are predominantly in the global north. And I think, in part, thanks to COVID-19, I know it's been detrimental to many and has actually stalled movements in a lot of the world. Many people are unable to travel or need to take PCR tests before they travel, which are expensive and may inhibit them from traveling. But due to COVID-19, a research institution like CMRS, we've done webinars. And we've done other online events where we're able to have a wider global reach and to show the quality academic research that we put out from the global south, that we are here and we do have an important stance not only within the Cairene and Egyptian communities, but also within the continent and the wider region. And I believe that we've been able to reach far more people due to the online presence. In addition, due to funding, thankfully, we have many now displaced students and refugees taking our classes, which I personally love. I love that these are my colleagues and my peers. They bring such an interesting and dynamic perspective to what we're learning. And I just think that AUC starting a refugee scholarship for now my friends is just a great opportunity for people who would otherwise probably be prohibited by the cost to attend university and to get a master's degree. And I think that this opportunity for them is amazing. And for me, I learned so much from them. So really, in conclusion, honestly, CMRS, there was no better place for me to study migration. I think it was the best opportunity for me. I was able to learn so much from my colleagues, my peers, my professors, to conduct research not only in Egypt, but to be funded to go to Jordan and Uganda and to do cross-country research within the Global South, and to now work in this important field where we truly look at the entire person and their holistic well-being, I think, is something that the other institutions don't necessarily have. And I'm just very thankful for that opportunity that CMRS allowed me. So thank you so much.
Shirihan, before you move on to the one, let me just make one point. I just want to confirm what Elena just said. I am personally very appreciative and very proud of the AUC administration in that every time we have gone to them for some sort of support for refugees or forced migrants, they have worked the AUC system to try to be as cooperative as they can be, and they've also worked with the Egyptian government to facilitate things. I just wanted to put that on record because there has never been a case where we've asked for help where they have not enthusiastically come forth, even beyond the issue of money. But Shirihan, go ahead.
Thank you, Elena, for sharing with us this rich experience. Please allow me to introduce our second alumni, Rawan. She's a GAPP alumni as well. She did both her bachelor's and master's degree at the School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. She finished her journalism and mass communication bachelor's degree in 2015 and her master's degree from the Kamal Adham Center in 2017. She's currently working as a business TV presenter at Al-Ghad TV. Rawan, please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Dean Nabil, for this event, and Talan Shirihan and Elena for the informative and insightful speech you gave. As Shirihan said, I'm a much more different sector than migration, but we still engage with this. I'm in the media sector, and as Elena said, we cover what's happening in the hotspot of the Middle East. A lot of things are happening since 2011, whether in Egypt or in the Middle East in general. Basically, what we work on, we don't make the news, but we get the news from these places. We report on them, and how we report on them is basically our job. It's not just getting the news and saying it or airing it. It's basically where the sources, we need to make sure of the sources that we get from the news, the people, the credible people that we need to talk to get some insights about the issues that we face, especially migration or the wars, civil wars in different places, unfortunately. Basically, Kamal Adham Center, or like the journalism center that I studied at, gave me a lot of hand-on experience in this field, which basically I work on till now. So working in the media is critical, and it's really hard to get into and to be, or to continue at least. So working in the media is basically, you need to be fresh-headed with the news. You need to keep up with all the sectors, I mean, politically, economically, community, everything you need to be aware of. So knowing about the migration numbers, knowing about the issues that they're facing, knowing about how they're living, their situations, what is the UN is doing to help them out, what is the centers of migration doing to help them out, how we can shed light on these migrants so that we can help them in our way. So basically, when I graduated from the AUC undergrad program, I didn't think of doing masters on this because I actually had like some other plans. But then when I saw this program of Adham Center, I thought of this might be, I can have a hand in this sector by giving out advice, by working on something, by working on stories, by talking to immigrants here in Egypt, Syrians, Iraqis, Yemenis, and doing stories on them just to shed light on them. And I had to work a one-man crew, meaning that I can write the script, find the story, shoot the story with a camera, and edit and do everything from A to Z, just me and the camera. So basically, Adham Center gave me the skills to do this. I can basically do this online because we have the technology now, and we are in a COVID-19 pandemic, but this doesn't stop me from shedding the light on the issues that we face in the community, whether they're economically or whether they're political or other than that. Basically, also what I learned from Adham Center or the GAPP school that gave me the opportunity to try on new things. I can't only work as a presenter or as on TV person, but I can work behind the scenes. I can find stories. I can dig on for a lot of other stuff that we can shed light on. This is my job. This is my job to shed light on problems, on issues that we're facing, not only here. I can work anywhere. I can work online. I can work on ground. It's a bit critical to be online, but then I have to work around that. And AUC basically gave me the opportunity to work, whether we have a condition or a pandemic or whatever situation we have. I still can't just stop and stay there. I can work and work my way out with this pandemic. Also, working on the media sector or in the media sector gave me a lot more on a personal level pushes. I mean, I wasn't that person of a talkative person, or I can go and ask for questions or do other stuff, but they gave me the push. All the professors, even the undergrad professors, they just gave me the push to learn. It's okay to ask. It's okay to dig in for a story. It's okay to, if someone said no, you should find other ways to find the answers for your questions. So basically, giving the push or giving the trust that you can do something is something that I learned from GAPP school, whether on campus or off campus. Also, GAPP school gave the students opportunities to be engaged in the ongoing stories around the world. I mean, as we are now, the panels that we're having are the event that we're having. A lot of people are watching us and they're learning what's happening around. Also, we had this in the undergrad or in the postgrad graduates. We had those events, face-to-face events at that time, and we learned a lot. We were engaged with what's happening. We were not in this bubble as many may see, that we're not engaged in what's happening in the world. On the contrary, we know what's happening. We've been reading a lot. We've been learning a lot. We've been doing all the projects that we need on these issues. So basically, we have the background, at least, to work on. So when we go out there in the community, we can work, we can do a lot of job, and people actually get a bit like confused, like how are you guys in the AUC know a lot about this, or you can work alone, or you can dig for a story or an interesting story. So this actually is a plus for us as AUCians or as graduates from AUC or GAPP school, to tell them that we can do something, we can shed the light, we have the language, we have the opportunities, and we have the skills to work with. No matter what the situation we are, we can work with any situation we are put into. So basically, I honestly will always go back to GAPP school if I had any kind of opportunity to learn more, because I know that basically GAPP school offer a lot of opportunities to face the challenges that we face. Basically, I am pretty sure that the GAPP school is a place to go to whenever you need to learn something new and an ongoing situation that you need to learn. Then you should go to GAPP school. I think it has a lot of opportunities to solve these challenges. And thank you again for this event and for this introduction. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rawan. This was really insightful. Thank you, Dean Fahmy and Elena. Dean Fahmy, do you have any questions for the speakers?
Sure, a comment and a question. I was just watching the screen, and I was very happy to see that gender-wise, I'm in the minority. I'm actually the only male on the screen, because in many of our events, unintentionally, we had fewer females than males. It was always unintentional. Well, I make an effort to be gender appropriate, but frankly, my focus is always on the quality rather than on the gender issue, maybe to a fault, if I may say. But so this time, again, it was on merit, and I'm the only one who's male here, and I'm very proud that we're doing this correctly. My second point, I'll ask a question to each of you. You sort of pushed me a little bit because I was so overwhelmed and impressed by your enthusiasm. And while I tend to be critical in my questions, I didn't really know how to overcome this, how proud I am of your approach to things, and how to nevertheless push you a little bit. But I will, nevertheless, it's for the sake of the discussion. If I may, Elena, traditionally, as you said, the migration for economic or the economic migration or the forced migration tended to be from developing countries to developed countries in the past. And in a lot of circumstances, for a long time, they were well received on a humanitarian basis. With globalization and if you want, I hate the term, but it's been used quite artistically, the clash of civilizations that we've seen, I see a little bit of resistance and anger, even in the developed world, towards migrants who are coming to their countries, be they coming for economic reasons or be they coming for humanitarian reasons. Do you see a problem or a contradiction between globalization per se and if you want, the humanitarian concepts that are supposed to govern migration issues? I'll ask also Rawan my question, and then I'll allow you both to answer at your leisure. First of all, Rawan, best of luck on your next campaign. So let me just put that in, and I'll let everybody wonder what I'm talking about. You can tell them if you want, but I won't get into that. The second point is, I'm a big fan of social networking. And I'm a big fan of that because, frankly, I'm not very good at it. Therefore, I join and follow it with a level of conservatism and not with the frequency that some of my younger colleagues do. But as much as I like the ability to have access to information, I must say that being a little bit older than all three of you, somewhat older, I used to enjoy very much watching the old media professionals and the old media institutions with the level of integrity and professionalism that they had before they allowed a news item to come out on the television screen, for example, before they used information without confirming it several times. And frankly, as much as they tried in the past, they worked on a day-to-day basis in a much smaller domain because they didn't have access to information all over the world. My question to you is, again, is the network capacity that we all have today creating a problem for the media? Are you getting an overload of information? Are you actually able to apply professional media integrity to that amount of information on a day-to-day basis? Is the pace of information coming in and its circulation, because it's not only circulating through official circles, it's also circulating on the social networking, is that a problem? And how do you envisage dealing with them? There's supposed to be two questions, but there'll be more than that. But anyway, Sharihan, you can manage how they answer that then.
Okay, Elena, can you start by answering the first question?
So thank you, Dean Fahmy, for that question. I think it's very important, but I don't necessarily think that the problem is with globalization and the so-called class of civilizations, as you had mentioned, but I think it's managing migration. The fact that now every country and nation state is trying to manage, is trying to legalize, is trying to put in these compartments people instead of looking at them as human beings, is what's actually the problem. And I know this probably isn't popular amongst certain individuals, especially those within these high-level INGOs. But I think once we started putting in strict visa policies, more stringent border controls, and instead of letting people just kind of circular migrate, for example, which was very common between, for example, Morocco and France and Spain within the 1970s, where individuals just, they went to Europe on a seasonal basis, usually working jobs that would not be worked by the national population. And then once they were done, they were able to go home and see their families, knowing that, in the next season, they would be able to go back. But once we, the European Union and North America and other countries started trying to manage migration, I think this is when the problem at least came really to the forefront, because we started seeing people as categories and as labels. You're here illegally, you're here legally, you're on this type of visa, you're on this type of visa. And we see them through these categories instead of seeing them as people, as workers, as forcibly displaced, as asylum seekers, as refugees. And we can even argue that these terms can be problematic as well. But I think if we're talking about globalization, I don't think that's necessarily the issue, because we allow imports to be, traded all throughout the world. We allow information to travel without borders, but for some reason, people we really want to manage. And I think this is where the root of the current problem is, and then where this rhetoric of xenophobia and racism and these issues come at hand.
Thank you, Elena. Rawan, would you like to answer the second question?
Yes, sure. For the first comment, Dean Fahmy, thank you very much for pointing this out. I am currently running for the parliament for the youth category, and today is the second day of the elections, basically, so I'm waiting for the results. But anyways, it's an opportunity that I was actually nominated. I'll give you a brief about this. I was actually nominated for this position because of the studies that I've made, and thank you for pointing this out, Dr. Nabil. I was nominated upon a lot of like candidates, and because of my work, because of my studies, and because of maybe they saw a lot of activities that I've done, they were like saying this could be an opportunity for someone like at this age to be running for this position. So hopefully I can work on this and do something good for the community in the next 5 years. About your question, Dr. Nabil, basically the traditional media has been going down a bit. I'm not going to say down the drain, but I mean it has its official times when we need to listen to the traditional media. But when I talk about social networking, either Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and basically Twitter, because as we see, Donald Trump is using Twitter as his main place to connect with people, or to talk, or to say anything, because basically he doesn't believe in any kind of other media. It's all fake news to him. But I'm not going to go into this. Social network is basically a challenge and an opportunity at the same time. A challenge for the traditional media as TV and radio, because it's a fast-paced place where a lot of news just come and go at the same time, where you can find a flow of information going on in a spare of second. So it is a challenge. And as a media person, we tend to, before announcing any kind of news, we need to make sure the source of this news. Is it Facebook? From where did Facebook or the user of Facebook get this piece of news? And then we go check again with the sources in itself. So it is a challenge, but at the same time, it helped us as journalists to maybe whatever we didn't get to shed light on, the people became journalists in themselves, and they started to report about protests, about other things, either positive or negative. So we get this information from them. But at first, as an official platform, we need to make sure that this information is right. And if it's not, then we shouldn't use it as a source of information to us. But basically, we try to cope with the internet. We try to cope with social network to be on the same level, because at the end of the day, it's a fast-paced platform that we need to keep our eyes on them, so that we don't miss out, and to know the fake news from the not fake news. So it is basically a challenge, but at the same time, it's an opportunity to know more and to get more sources and to reach out to people much more easier, to know their opinions, to know their thoughts about any kind of topic. And that's how we get our topics for the talk shows and for the any kind of program that we air. Also, at this point, we need to make sure of what kind of platform we're using. Is it basically Twitter is mainly for a more serious note. Facebook is more about the engagement of people, engagement of the community together, and the reactions on any situation happening around. And Instagram, I think it's more of a maybe for fun, I guess. We don't use really Instagram for that, but mainly Twitter and Facebook.
Thank you, Rawan. Dean Fahmy.
Yeah, just a comment, and then I see one question, I think, on the screen. Look, again, I was listening to you carefully, and Elena focused in responding to my question very much on the need to preserve the humanity and of the issues, rather than to try to compartmentalize them into structures that are not necessarily correct to start off with and tend to be reactive. And Rawan, in everything she said, was always careful to be inclusive. I was very happy to see that she wasn't ruling anything out. She was actually simply saying, yes, that's there. We need to see what they're doing. We have our way of presenting things, but she, I mean, I wasn't trying, but I didn't succeed anyway, to push her to say social networking is wrong. But that's not my opinion, by the way. I'm a supporter of it, although I'm not a very smart user. You reminded me of the GAPP motto, which is enlightened governments. Now, at GAPP, we do not spend too much time promoting the motto, but in listening to you two young ladies, you've let me conclude that we're actually succeeding in achieving that, irrespective of whether we're very good at the advertising and public propaganda part of it. So again, and I'm not trying to flatter you too much, I am proud of you, and I'm very happy to see you in your responses as GAPP graduates. Shirihan, I see a question on the chat list.
Yes, there is a question asking Elena and Rawan about how their advice actually to give advice to the graduating students and how they can start preparing for the current challenges from now. Rawan, would you like to answer, or Elena?
Okay, I'll start. Basically, create your own opportunities. That's what I believe in. So basically, if you have any kind of opportunity to put on the ground what you learned from your school, then you should do that. You should start trying out. Even if you didn't succeed, at least you tried, at least you knew what to do and what not to do. So it's not like a basic list that we're going through or a checklist that we're going through, but you need to go there and try your best with all your equipments, with all your knowledge. You need to go there and try and keep on trying, and never think that it will come from the first time. It will never come from the first time. And if it did, then chapeau, yani. But if it didn't, just don't let this let you down at all. Just keep on trying, believe in what you're doing, and you will get there one day or another.
I just want to add to keep the networks that you form within graduate school and even outside of graduate school, but during the time you're in school, because these resources will be great right after you graduate, maybe 5, 10, 15 plus years down the road. So form connections, form relationships with your professors, with your peers, with your colleagues. If you do research, with your interlocutors, with the staff, and with everyone that you come in contact with, because these networks and these relationships that you form are very important, not just only for your own good and for your own success, but for the success of those around you. Because if you're working within a field like migration and refugee studies, for example, I can use this as my own example. I now have friends working in NGOs within Cairo, and we all assist one another if there's an issue, if we can help someone, or there's a research question that needs to be answered. So keep those networks and those relationships that you form within graduate school, for sure.
Shirihan, can I come in again on this?
Sure.
I've had the opportunity and the luxury of joining the labor force and being somebody who hires from the labor force, different points in my career. And all I can do is confirm what you both just said. When somebody's hired, he wasn't hired because he's like the hiree. He's hired because whoever's hiring him likes what he sees or needs what he sees. So the point of departure should always be, you were hired because you are who you are. Use it. Let your boss and the if you want, the network, the group you're working with, let them take advantage of the quality that you bring to the theater. Don't try to speak like them. Don't try to repeat what they're saying, but try to add to it in a constructive fashion. I'm not arguing that you should get into a confrontation every day. That's not the issue. But honestly speaking, and I say this respectfully, throughout my career in different positions, I would always have somebody in my office who was a devil's advocate. I made it a point to have somebody there who, for lack of a better term, was a bit of an oddball, because I wanted to be challenged all the time. I did not want to be in an echo chamber. So I highly recommend that all young graduates, when they start their jobs, yes, be respectful, be constructive, but have confidence in yourself. Bring up your ideas, bring up your expertise, which will mature over time. Bring it to your bosses. You have something to add to the venue you're working at. The challenge really is you're going to bring to them something different. But, and this takes me to Elena's point, but at the end of the day, if you want your opinion and your addition alone to be the only factor on the table, you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to have to work in a community. You're going to have to work in an economy. You're going to have to work in a project that involves more than one person. So it is always important to listen and learn. It's always important, and I completely agree with Elena here. I'm not very good in the social aspects of my different professions, but I always made it a point to keep my networks alive. Not because I wanted to take advantage of them, but frankly, because there were points, especially when I came to academia, there were points where I could reach out to somebody that I knew in a different profession or at different periods of my life and ask them to come and add their expertise. I can also tell you that whether it is in academia or when I was working professionally in other capacities, I was repeatedly asked by my bosses, well, you have a good network, try to find somebody who can help us on this or on that. So again, Rowan's point of bringing what you have to the table is extremely important. And Elena's point also that we're living in a community, whether it is a small village community, a metropolis, or a country, or even a global community. You have to learn how to work with others, and frankly, you need to engage and interact with others. Long time ago, we, even here in Egypt, when I was growing up, you were basically competing with the Egyptian marketplace, physically, not only because of any particular issues in Egypt. By the time my children and their adult children graduated, they got their jobs on the internet. So they were competing globally. And what they brought to the table in the different jobs that they got were both what Rowan said and what Elena mentioned. They brought to the table their expertise. Well, they were hired abroad. They weren't hired abroad to be repetitive of Italy or Emirates or France. They were hired abroad for the Egyptian perspective and their personal perspective of things. And frankly, for all three of them, they are repeatedly asked to reach out beyond their present theater where they're living in to, well, do you, given your experience having traveled around the world or worked internationally, or now being connected to the internet, do you know somebody or do you know something further than this? And I would conclude just with one point, and I say this respectfully, but also a bit, I must say, a bit embarrassed about it. I revert to Google all the time. And just reverting to Google is, in a way, reaching out to the network. Yes, the network, I don't really know it, but I use both Rowan's skills and Elena's skills when I reach out to Google, because I reach out for information that I would normally get from people, and I use modalities that I had never known in the past. When I was doing this in your age, it was Encyclopedia Britannica that we referred to. which is not the case. And it wasn't as easy as Google, frankly. And again, this is great advice to the young graduates. Last thing I tell them, you always have to do your best. This is I mean, as much as there's more opportunity than there was when I was your age, because the market was smaller, it's much more competitive than it was in the past. So unless you want to do your best and a little bit more than that, you will not reach the level of prominence that satisfy your ambition. So be yourself, use your skills, engage with your community, use your networks. There's no reason to close the door to anybody. But if you don't want to make a best effort, believe me, you will regret this. So I want to really emphasize the importance of a best effort. Shireen, do you have anybody else on the list?
Yes, actually, I've received so many questions, but due to the time constraint, I will summarize the questions basically in one question. I would like to ask the speakers about the most valuable qualities that you've learned from the GAPP school.
I think for me to critically analyze what's going on. So either in the media, in what politicians are saying, and policies that are written, to look at it from the perspective of the professors that I learned, not from their perspective, but to look at it from a perspective from the global south more so, especially in regards to, as Dean Fahmy mentioned, rising xenophobia, and these policies that are coming out from the European Union, which, you know, tried to broker friendship and partnership, and do they really do that? And just, you know, these policies also that politicians are trying to espouse through their platforms. So just to critically engage with them, but also to be critical at times and to analyze them and to be confident enough in my analysis and my critique that I'm using the background information and academics that I learned through CMRS.
Well, for me, GAPP school, as I said before, that I can always go back to AUC or GAPP school, because I know that professors, whenever I need help with anything, I would go back to them and ask them for their advice and for their, this is actually, as Elena said, this is like one of my connections, my first connections to start my career. So here it is, like going back to my professors is one thing. They're very helpful and they are very welcoming to any kind of, you're not just a student, you're an alumni, and you're then their colleague and their everything. So basically you need to go back to them. Second thing, as I said before, that it gave me the opportunity to find more on a personal level what I can do, what I can do, what I can make, and what I can find, what the skills I had learned can apply on ground. So this is a very important thing, to know what you can do is like shedding light on yourself and how to use your skills to know more and to dig in your career. And lastly, of course, as we see that AUC never forgets its alumni. So going always back to the alumni and experiencing what they, or saying what they experienced in their careers so far, would really help in these events like we're having now. Will really help other undergrads and postgraduates with what's happening now and keeping them engaged with what's happening at the moment.
Unfortunately, we've come to the end of our webinar today. I would like to thank...
Sorry? I'm still the dean, so I'll push her for just one more minute.
Okay.
This is not my question, but it's actually a question on the chat list, but I completely support it. As I said, GAPP focuses on the common good and public affairs. Our students are mostly like you, those who have that commitment. Some of them are, with all due respect, less able to join the school because of financial obligations or the need to work at the same time. And whenever we can provide assets to help, it's something that we're very proud of. And I think we have quite a decent record so far as GAPP, given that we're only about a decade old. But let me just make a pitch to alumni generally. We need your support, not for GAPP, but for your successors, to be able to bring in the best students around Egypt the same way you were there, although you may not have been on scholarship. We need to work with alumni to generate more funds specifically for scholarships for GAPP students. And I see from your smiles that you probably expected me to say that, but believe me, I support it, but it wasn't my question. Go ahead, Sherry.
Okay, this was a question?
No, just a comment. And in the future, and it's for all alumni, it's not a question for the...
Okay. Okay, thank you, Dean Fahmy. Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Rawan. And I will also like to thank the AUC Alumni Office to give us this opportunity to host two of our prominent GAPP alumni. Thank you, everyone. And I hope you enjoyed this webinar, and I hope that we will host another one very soon. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.